Welcome back. I'm Angela, and this is my November writing update, which means, first off, very exciting that I am actually writing again. It had been a while. I did Nano in July. I wrote 50,000 words for the first time ever in a month, and then I didn't write for like 3.5 months, 4 months. I don't know how math works. Yeah, for a long time. But the last couple of weeks, I finally managed to start writing again. I started writing again this month. I basically managed to ease myself back into it. Like, I tricked myself into writing by first off re-watching Brandon Sanderson's BYU lecture series on teaching or on writing science fiction and fantasy, which is just very enjoyable. Sanderson is like a really good lecturer. At this point, Sanderson just has a good sense of where developing writers are and how to speak to them. The like self-help writing industry, I guess, is still very much in a place often that's like very prescriptive, right? In terms of like, this is the way that you must do things, or this is how story works, which is just antithetical to the way that like good teaching happens, and also antithetical to A, the human experience, and B, creativity especially. So it's really nice to have someone like Brandon Sanderson so consistently and clearly articulating the importance in different processes and the fact that like different people work differently and create different things and the value in that. It's just really fun to watch. He also like talks about story in ways that make sense to me and that click for me, so I'm sure that that's part of it too. In particular, this time through, I've like really appreciated listening to him talk about plot. Plot is not a thing that really makes much sense to me intuitively, and I've really struggled a lot of the time with the advice that people give, which is often writing books like Story Genius or Save the Cat, which like totally work for some people, but for me, first off, I can't handle the whole, I have unlocked the way that story works, this is how you must do things. Like, I can't handle that tone because it's like, it's bad pedagogy and I genuinely can't handle it. But then also, I find a lot of those formulas, and for me they do feel like formulas, really interesting, but I don't find them helpful for myself, because when I try and use them, and also actually just when I do a lot of outlining generally, then my brain is just like, oh, but you're just making that up. Which is like, obviously how storytelling works, like that's what fiction writing is, right, is making things up. But for me, when I've tried to use things like Save the Cat in the past, it feels very salient and authentic. Like, for me, I really want to understand how plot works, and I understand that those like kinds of structures work for some folks, but for me, they don't really help me understand how plot works. And actually, that has been something that's been really interesting about listening to a lot of Sanderson's discussions on writing, because he, when talking about plot, will sort of differentiate between structure, which is things like, you know, the 3-act structure, the 7-point structure, or Save the Cat, or Story Genius, like things like that, and then what he calls elemental genre, which for me is like the why behind plot. So things like Save the Cat are like the how, right? Like, how do you craft a plot? And then elemental genre, Sanderson and others go into in season 11 of Writing Excuses, is kind of like the why behind it. So like, what are different kinds of stories that we create? What emotions do those elicit? Why do people like those? And thinking about those as two separate things that connect has been really exciting for me and really interesting to me, and I think has made me more interested in and able to learn about structure. So yeah, I basically tricked myself back into writing, in part by listening to Brandon Sanderson talk a lot about writing, which gets me hyped. And then the other very exciting thing is that I'm actually writing short fiction. At the beginning of like last year, I was like, this is gonna be the short fiction year. You're gonna finish your first novel and then you're gonna move into writing shorts, and that just didn't happen. I instead started another novel and revised my first novel, and then realized that I couldn't handle my second novel and stopped writing. And so a lot of what has been like me not writing the last few months is first off the fact that the world was on fire, but then also has been feeling like really trapped in sort of the projects I was in. And I basically got to the point where I was looking at my first novel, Project Harper, right, which I brought into my writing group and gotten really cool feedback on, and there's lots of things that I do want to change in that project that would make it better. It was a thing where like I still think of Project Harper as a trunk novel, and I know what I could fix, but I don't know that I'd learn a lot from the fixing, if that makes sense. And it would have been like at least like 2 months of work. So I was like, is this the right call? And I decided it wasn't, so I like shelved Project Harbor. And the only other long form thing I want to work on right now is Project Aeneas, which is the story that I started writing in July. And I just recently went back through and looked at a lot of it. And there's a lot that I'm really excited about, especially in terms of like concepts and startlingly world building, which like the world building's not great. But for me, I was like, hey, this is fine. We're okay. But I'm not equipped to write that book yet. Like, I'm really, really not. I was in so far over my head. And so then that, like, brings me back to short fiction, which is, I think, a place that I can practice a lot of those things. Which I know is, like, controversial advice, right? Because writing short fiction and writing novels are not the same. But there are a lot of similarities, especially in terms of like the things that I feel like I still need to learn, like how to craft a scene and just like developing my prose and developing characterization, and all of that stuff is stuff that I can learn and experiment with faster and easier in a smaller form. It just reached a point where I was like, I'm gonna just be making so much more work for myself doing this big project with the skill set I have now instead of improving my skill set. So I've like logically known that I should shift to short fiction, but I haven't. Like, I haven't successfully done it till this month, when I've met, like, I'm working on a couple of different things. And then also the other super important thing is that I am actually reading short fiction. Like, I've read a short story every day for like 2 weeks now, which is something, again, I've been trying to do for a year, and I just I've never read short fiction. And I've just started, and I'm really enjoying it. I've also been realizing that I kind of think in short fiction a lot, if that makes sense. I've had so many ideas that now I'm like starting to realize, like, the reason that I felt like the idea was broken was because it was an idea for a short story. And so I'd look at these ideas and I'd be like, how do I merge it with other things? How do I grow this idea? How do I turn it into a longer thing? And like, the problem was just that like it wasn't a longer thing, like it's short fiction. And starting to actually read short stories and things like that, I think has been super helpful in starting to get a sense of the ways that different lengths of story fit different ideas. And it's just really interesting and really exciting, and I'm having a good time with it. So that has been November. I'm really working to hopefully have a fairly consistent writing habit next month and sort of end the year strong. It's definitely been like a mixed bag in terms of writing, but especially if I can really commit next month to writing, I think that I will look back on this year as a super important one and like a productive one in terms of my creativity and what I got done, which would be very exciting. If you are currently working on creative projects, please let me know how those are going down in the comments. I hope that the rest of 2020 is kind to all of you. That is about it. If you like this video, you can go ahead and hit the little thumbs up. If you are curious about my further adventures in fiction, feel free to subscribe and stick around. And that is everything. Bye, lovelies. Happy December.